I heard the siren from the dam before I saw the fence. Low. Mechanical. Wrong. Then the chain link rattled in the wind, stretched across my river like it had always been there. A fresh sign hung crooked on the post. Willow Creek Community Water Access. I stopped walking. Gravel crunched under my boots, louder than it should have been. The water kept moving. Like nothing had changed. That was the first thing that felt off. Because everything had changed. A golf cart rolled up behind me. Tires humming soft. Margaret stepped out in white tennis shoes that never touched dirt. "You can't be here," she said, like she'd been rehearsing it. I looked past her. Down the slope. Wooden decks. New railings. People already setting up chairs along my bank. Someone laughed. The sound carried across the water like it belonged there. It didn't. "This is private property," I said. My voice came out steady. Too steady. She smiled. Tight. Polished. Not anymore. A police cruiser idled at the top of the hill. Engine ticking. Waiting. That felt planned. I tasted metal in the air. Like rain coming. But the sky was clear. One of the officers stepped closer. Hand resting on his belt. "Sir, we've had a report of trespassing." I almost laughed. It caught in my throat. I reached into my jacket. Pulled out the old deed copy I always carried. Paper worn thin at the folds. He barely looked at it. "The HOA filed updated access rights," he said. "You'll need to take it up with them." I looked back at the river. The current slid past the new posts like it didn't recognize them. That was the second thing that didn't make sense. Water doesn't care about paperwork. Margaret leaned in slightly. I could smell her perfume. Sweet. Sharp. "You should have paid more attention," she said. Things change. Behind her, a worker hammered the last bracket into place. Metal rang out. Clean. Final. That sound stuck with me. I stepped back. Not because I agreed. Because I needed to see. The officer gestured toward the road. I turned. Walked uphill. Each step slower than the last. The siren from the dam hummed again. Faint. Almost buried under the wind. My chest tightened for a second. Then it settled. Something wasn't right. Not with the fence. Not with the timing. Not with the water level hugging the banks a little too high for a dry morning. I paused at the truck door. Looked back one more time. Kids were already dipping their feet in the river. Margaret stood there watching me leave. Certain. That certainty felt fragile. I opened the door. The smell of dust and old leather hit me. Familiar. Grounding. I sat there a moment. Listening. The hum from upstream didn't stop. It never should have started. I glanced toward the ridge where the control road disappeared behind trees. No one from the HOA ever went up there. No one except me. My hand rested on the keys, but I didn't start the engine yet. Because if they thought they owned the river now, they had no idea what they had just stepped into. I did not drive home. I drove uphill. The tires hummed against the gravel as the road narrowed and the trees closed in. Dust lifted behind me in a slow cloud. The kind that hangs in the air longer than it should. I kept the window cracked. The smell of dry earth mixed with something colder. Damp. Out of place. That was the third thing that felt wrong. The river was running higher than it should have been for this time of year. No rain. No storm runoff. Still, the current had weight to it. I could feel it even from the road. The gate to the service path came into view. Old steel. Faded paint. The lock hung exactly where I left it. Untouched. That made me slow down. If they really believed they owned the river, why had no one come up here? I killed the engine. Silence settled in fast. No voices. No laughter. Just wind brushing through the trees and that low mechanical hum ahead. I stepped out. Gravel shifted under my boots. Each step felt louder than it should. The path curved along the ridge, leading straight to the dam. Concrete rose through the trees like it always had. Solid. Quiet. Patient. I ran my hand along the railing as I walked. Cold metal. Slight vibration. That hum again. It should not have been active. Not without a release schedule. Not without a trigger. I paused halfway across the platform. Looked down. The reservoir behind the dam sat higher. Than normal. Not flooding. Not yet. But close enough to notice. The surface barely moved. Too still. Like it was waiting. I checked the sky again. Clear. Blue. No incoming weather. That meant one thing. The system had been adjusted. Recently. My chest tightened, just for a second. Then it passed. I moved toward the control box. Same place. Same lock. No scratches. No signs of tampering. I crouched slightly. Looked closer. The dust around the base had been disturbed. Fresh marks. Light. Careful. Someone had been here. Not long ago. I straightened slowly. Listened. Nothing but the hum. That steady, low vibration under the concrete. I keyed in my access code. The panel lit up instantly. Numbers clean. Responsive. No override warnings. No alerts. That was the fourth thing that did not make sense. If someone had changed anything, there should have been a record. I scrolled through the logs. Dates. Times. All normal at first glance. Then one entry caught my eye. 2 nights ago. Manual adjustment. No operator ID. Just a blank field where a name should have been. That never happens. Not on a system like this. I felt the air shift. Subtle. Like pressure building before a storm. I looked back toward the valley. The river cut through the land below, winding past those new decks, those chairs, those people who thought they understood what they were standing next to. They had no idea how much water sat behind this wall. Or how fast it could move when it needed to. I rested my hand on the control lever. Cold. Solid. Familiar. The hum beneath my feet grew slightly louder. Not by much. But enough. Enough to notice if you knew what to listen for. And I did. I stared at that blank operator line again, trying to understand who would touch a system they did not control, and why they would leave it running just like this. I did not touch the lever. Not yet. My hand stayed there, resting on cold metal, feeling that faint vibration travel up my arm. The system was running, but it was not following schedule. That meant someone had forced it. Quietly. Carefully. I scrolled through the logs again. Same blank entry. Same missing name. Whoever did this knew how to hide inside the system. That was not HOA behavior. That was something else. I leaned closer to the panel. The screen glow reflected faintly off the concrete. A small detail caught my eye. Flow rate had been adjusted. Not enough to trigger alarms. Just enough to raise downstream levels over time. Slow. Controlled. Intentional. My jaw tightened. That kind of adjustment does not happen by accident. I stepped back and looked out across the reservoir again. The surface still looked calm. Too calm. Like pressure sitting just beneath it. I checked the manual override seal. Still intact. No break. No visible tampering. That made it worse. Because it meant whoever accessed this did not break in. They had a way in. I pulled out my phone. No signal up here. Never had been. That isolation used to feel like peace. Now it felt like a blind spot. I walked along the edge of the platform, boots echoing against the concrete. The hum grew stronger near the spillway gates. Subtle. But steady. I stopped near the railing and looked down at the narrow channel below. Water pushed through faster than it should. Not rushing. Not yet. But building. I could see it in the color. Slightly darker. Slightly heavier. I had seen this before. Not here. But in places where water was used as leverage. I exhaled slowly. The air felt cooler near the structure. Damp. Charged. Like something was about to shift. I turned back to the panel. Scrolled deeper into the system logs. Maintenance access. 2 nights ago. Same timestamp. Same blank operator ID. But this time, I noticed something else. The authorization level. It was not local. It was higher. Federal tier clearance. My fingers froze for a second over the screen. That should not be possible. Not without direct coordination. Not without paperwork. Not without me knowing. I looked at the reservoir again, then back at the panel. The pieces did not line up. HOA does not have access to this. Margaret does not even know this system exists beyond what she can see from below. So why would someone with that level of access adjust the flow just days after the HOA fenced off my river? That was not coincidence. That was alignment. I felt a slow pressure build in my chest. Not panic. Something sharper. Recognition. I moved to the side cabinet and opened it. Inside, the manual schematics were still rolled tight. Edges worn from years of use. I spread one across the surface. Lines. Valves. Secondary channels. Emergency overflow routes. My finger traced the main path downstream. It passed directly through the area they had just developed. Decks. Seating. Walkways. All built within the flood adjustment zone. I stared at that section longer than I should have. They had not just taken the river. They had built on top of something they did not understand. And someone else had just adjusted the system to make sure it mattered. I folded the schematic slowly, but my eyes stayed on that downstream section. The paper made a dry, brittle sound as I rolled it back. My fingers paused over one detail. A secondary relief channel. Old. Rarely used. It branched off just before the main flow hit their new construction. Most people would never notice it. Most people would not even know it existed. But it was still active. Still connected. Still controlled from this panel. I glanced back at the logs. That same timestamp. That same silent adjustment. Whoever accessed the system did not open the gates fully. They nudged the flow. Enough to raise pressure across both channels. That meant both paths were now carrying more weight than they should. My throat felt dry. I stepped back to the railing again. Looked down toward the valley. From this height, everything seemed calm. The decks. The umbrellas. The neat rows of chairs placed too close to the waterline. It all looked stable. But I knew better. Water does not need chaos to cause damage. It only needs time and pressure. And right now, it had both. A gust of wind moved across the reservoir behind me. The surface rippled once, then settled again. That ripple should have traveled slower. It did not. That told me the depth had increased. Quietly. Gradually. I turned back toward the control panel. My reflection flickered across the screen for a second. Tired eyes. Dust on my jacket. Someone who had just been told he did not belong on his own land. That thought lingered for a moment. Then it passed. Because this was no longer just about ownership. This was about control. I moved through the menu again. Cross-checked the system against the original parameters burned into memory from years of work. The differences were small. Precise. Deliberate. Whoever made them understood how to stay invisible. That meant they understood the consequences too. My jaw tightened slightly. That left only two possibilities. Either they did not care what would happen downstream. Or they were waiting for it. I stepped closer to the main lever again. My hand hovered just above it. Not touching. Not yet. If I reset the system now, everything would stabilize. The pressure would ease. The river would settle back into its normal rhythm. No one downstream would even know how close they had come. But that would also erase the evidence. The logs were already thin. The adjustments were subtle. If I wiped it clean, whoever did this would disappear without a trace. I exhaled slowly. The air felt heavier now. Like the structure itself was holding something back. I looked at the access log again. Federal clearance. No name. No authorization trail. That was not a mistake. That was deliberate erasure. I closed the panel halfway. Let it hang there. The hum beneath my feet continued. Steady. Patient. Waiting for input. Waiting for direction. I looked out one more time toward the river. A child ran along the edge of the water below. Shoes splashing lightly against the surface. Laughing. Completely unaware. The adults sat back in their chairs. Relaxed. Certain nothing could go wrong. That certainty felt dangerous. Because it was built on something they did not understand. I rested my hand against the panel again. Felt the vibration more clearly now. It had increased. Just slightly. Enough to confirm what I already suspected. The system was still adjusting itself. Still pushing forward. And no one down there had any idea it had already started. I closed the panel just enough to dim the glow, but not enough to stop the system. The hum stayed steady. Low. Persistent. Like a heartbeat you only notice when you try to sleep. I stepped back from the controls and let my eyes adjust to the open light again. The reservoir. Behind me looked calm. Too calm. That still surface held more weight than it showed. I had seen this pattern before. Slow pressure. Silent buildup. Then everything changes at once. I ran my hand along the concrete edge. Cool. Slightly damp. The moisture line sat higher than it should have. Just a few inches. Easy to miss if you did not know where to look. That was the fifth thing that did not add up. I glanced back at the logs one more time in my mind. No name. Federal clearance. Adjustments that looked harmless unless you understood flow behavior. Whoever did this knew exactly how much to push without raising alarms. That meant they expected someone like me to notice. Or they did not care if I did. Neither option felt comfortable. I moved toward the side walkway that overlooked the secondary channel. My boots echoed softly with each step. The sound bounced off the concrete walls and came back just slightly delayed. That delay felt longer than usual. I stopped halfway and listened. The water below carried a different tone now. Not loud. Not aggressive. But deeper. Heavier. Like it was pulling more than it released. I leaned over the railing. The secondary channel was active. That alone should not have happened. It only opens under specific load conditions. Yet here it was, carrying a steady stream. Clear. Controlled. Quietly feeding into the same downstream area where those decks now sat. I straightened slowly. My fingers tightened against the railing. That was not random. That was routing. Someone had adjusted both paths to converge pressure into the same zone. Over time, that would raise levels faster than normal release patterns. Not enough to flood immediately. Just enough to create instability. The kind you do not notice until it is too late to correct easily. I exhaled and stepped back. The wind shifted again. This time it carried a faint smell of wet vegetation. Algae. Freshly stirred. That smell should have been stronger after rainfall. Not now. Not under clear skies. I checked the horizon again. Nothing but open blue. No clouds. No incoming system. Yet the water was behaving like it was preparing for one. I walked back toward the control panel, slower. This time. Thinking through each possibility. Equipment failure did not fit. Too precise. Natural change did not fit. Too sudden. That left intent. Quiet. Calculated intent. I paused before the panel and rested my hand against it again. The vibration felt stronger now. Not much. But enough to confirm the trend. The system was still adjusting itself. Still pushing forward without input. That meant the process had not finished. It was building toward something. I looked out toward the valley again. The people were still there. Moving. Laughing. Unaware. The waterline crept forward in small, almost invisible shifts. Inches that no one would question. Inches that would matter later. I closed my eyes for a second. Let the pattern settle in my head. 2 channels. Increased flow. Converging pressure. Downstream development placed directly in the adjustment zone. And a missing name tied to federal access. When I opened my eyes again, the answer was not complete. But it was forming. And it pointed somewhere I had not expected to look. I did not move right away. I just stood there with my hand on the panel, letting the pattern settle deeper. 2 channels. Increased flow. Converging pressure. That was not random. That was design. The hum beneath my palm pulsed slightly stronger, like the system was confirming what I already knew. I opened the panel again. The screen lit up clean. No warnings. No alarms. Just numbers moving within acceptable limits. That was the trick. Everything looked normal until you understood how the pieces connected. I scrolled further down into the authorization layers. The deeper menu. The one most operators never touch. My access code still worked. It always had. But what I saw there made me stop. A secondary credential had been used. Not mine. Not local. It came from a remote terminal. Timestamp matched the same entry. Same blank name. But this time, there was a trace. A location tag. Faint. Partial. It did not give a full address. Just a system origin. County Planning Network. I leaned closer to the screen. The glow sharpened the lines on the panel. County planning does not control water systems. They request permits. They review impact. They do. Not adjust flow. That meant someone inside that network had access they should not have. Or someone gave it to them. I stepped back slowly. My boots echoed softer now. Like the structure itself was absorbing the sound. I looked out toward the valley again. The decks. The chairs. The people. All placed exactly where the pressure would build first. That was not coincidence. That was alignment between two systems that should never overlap. I thought about Margaret. Her confidence. Her timing. The way the fence went up overnight. The way permits were suddenly approved without delay. That kind of speed does not happen without help. Real help. The kind that moves paperwork before anyone can question it. My jaw tightened slightly. This was bigger than a property dispute. This was coordination. Quiet. Clean. And almost invisible if you did not know where to look. I moved back to the schematic cabinet and pulled out another sheet. This one older. Edges more worn. It showed the original flood adjustment zoning. Before updates. Before revisions. Before anyone started reshaping boundaries to fit development plans. My finger traced the old lines. The ones that clearly marked this entire downstream section as restricted. No permanent structures. No public access. No modifications without federal oversight. I held that paper up against the current layout in my mind. They had built directly inside a zone that was never meant to be touched. And someone had signed off on it. Or buried the restriction deep enough that no one would see it. I folded the sheet slowly. The paper made a sharper sound this time. Like tension had found its way into everything around me. I walked back toward the panel again. The hum continued. Steady. Controlled. Still building. I checked the flow numbers one more time. Slight increase. Just enough to confirm the direction. This was not finished. It was still progressing. That meant whoever set this in motion expected it to continue without interruption. Expected no one to interfere. I rested my hand on the lever again. This time I felt the resistance more clearly. Not physical. Structural. Like the system itself was holding a balance that could shift. With one input. I looked out toward the valley one more time. The waterline had crept forward again. Inches. Quiet inches. The kind that become feet if no one stops them. I exhaled slowly. The situation was clearer now. HOA did not start this. They were just standing in the wrong place at the right time. The real question was why someone else wanted the water to move this way. And who they expected to be there when it did. I kept my hand on the lever, but I did not pull it. Not yet. The system was balanced on something fragile. I could feel it in the vibration. Too steady. Too controlled. Like it was waiting for a final input. I stepped back from the panel and looked at the entire structure again. Not just the controls. The walls. The channels. The way the water pressed quietly against everything holding it in place. This was not chaos. This was precision. I moved quickly to the access logs again and took photos of every screen. Every entry. Every missing field. My phone struggled to focus in the dim light, but I made sure nothing was lost. If someone had gone through the trouble to hide their identity, it meant they did not want this traced. That alone made it valuable. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and turned toward the lower service stairs. My boots hit each step with a sharper echo now. The sound bounced back faster. The air felt denser the closer I got to the base of the structure. That pressure again. Building. I reached the lower platform and paused. The secondary channel ran just a few feet away. Water moved through it with a smooth, controlled force. Not aggressive. Not loud. But stronger than it should have been. I crouched down slightly and touched the railing. It vibrated faintly under my fingers. That confirmed it. The load was increasing across both systems. Not fast. But steady. I stood up and looked downstream again. From here, I could see the exact point where both channels rejoined the main flow. It lined up perfectly with the new development. Decks placed right along the edge. Walkways extending just far enough to look impressive, but not far enough to stay safe. They had built for appearance, not for function. That difference mattered now. I took a slow breath and turned back toward the stairs. The wind shifted again, carrying a faint echo from below. Laughter. Music. The sound of people enjoying something they believed was theirs. That sound felt distant. Fragile. Like it could disappear with one change. I climbed back up to the control level, slower this time. Thinking through the timing. The system was still building. That meant I still had control over when this shifted. Not if. When. I stepped back to the panel and opened it fully. The numbers confirmed everything. Gradual increase. No automatic correction. No safety override triggered. Whoever set this up had bypassed the threshold that would normally stabilize the flow. That required knowledge. Detailed knowledge. I hovered my hand over the lever again. This time, I understood exactly what it would do. Not release everything. Not cause a sudden surge. Just accelerate what was already happening. Speed up the process they had already started. Make it visible. Make it undeniable. My fingers tightened slightly. Then relaxed. This was not about reacting. This was about timing. I glanced once more at the authorization log. County Planning Network. That connection kept pulling at the back of my mind. They approved the construction. They adjusted the flow. That was not an accident. That was coordination. I closed the panel halfway again and stepped back. The hum continued. Stronger now. More noticeable. The system was reaching a point where small changes would have bigger effects. That was the window. The moment where control actually meant something. I looked out toward the valley one last time. The waterline had moved again. Not enough for them to panic. Not yet. But enough that anyone paying attention would start to question it. The kind of shift that spreads quietly before anyone knows what it means. I rested my hand lightly against the panel again. Felt the vibration settle into a steady rhythm. Then I looked down at the lever and finally understood exactly when I was going to move it. I did not rush it. I waited. My hand hovered over the lever while my eyes stayed fixed on the valley below. The shift was already happening. Subtle. Quiet. But real. The waterline had crept forward again. Inches turning into something more noticeable. A chair leg near the edge now sat half an inch deeper than before. No one reacted. Not yet. That was the moment I needed. The moment where doubt begins, but certainty has not broken. I wrapped my fingers around the lever. Cold metal. Solid resistance. Familiar. The hum beneath my feet steadied, like the system recognized input before I even moved. I exhaled slowly and pulled. Not far. Just enough to change the rate. The response was immediate. Not dramatic. But precise. The vibration under the concrete shifted tone. Slightly deeper. Slightly stronger. I released the lever and stepped back. The panel adjusted the numbers on its own. Flow rate increased by a controlled margin. Still within limits. Still technically safe. But no longer subtle. I turned toward the railing and looked down again. The change was not visible all at once. It never is. It starts in patterns. Ripples tightening. Edges softening. The water moved with more weight now. It pushed instead of gliding. A small wave brushed against the lowest deck post. Then another. Slightly higher. One of the people near the edge paused. Looked down. Tilted their head like something did not feel right. That hesitation spread faster than the water. I watched as a few others stood up. Shoes stepping back just a little. Conversations shifting tone. The laughter dropped. Not gone. Just thinner. I leaned on the railing. Calm. Controlled. Watching the system do exactly what it was designed to do when pushed beyond quiet limits. The secondary channel fed into the main flow with more force now. I could see it clearly from here. The convergence point darkened. Water stacking on water. Pressure meeting pressure. The surface stayed smooth, but the movement underneath had changed. That is where most people get it wrong. They wait for chaos. But water does not announce itself like that. It builds. It adjusts. Then it takes space. One of the umbrellas near the edge tilted slightly as the ground beneath it softened. Barely noticeable. But enough. A man walked over and pressed his foot near the base. Testing it. His posture shifted. Confusion. Then concern. That was the moment the illusion started to crack. I stepped back toward the panel again and checked the numbers. Still climbing. Still controlled. No alarms. No overrides. Just progression. Whoever set this in motion had planned for it to look exactly like this. Gradual. Explainable. Easy to ignore until it was not. I rested my hand lightly on the panel again. The vibration felt stronger now. Not aggressive. But undeniable. The system was fully engaged. I looked back out one more time. The waterline had moved another inch. This time, people noticed. A few stepped back quickly. Others pointed. Someone crouched near the edge, touching the surface like they expected an answer from it. The sound from below had changed completely. No more steady laughter. Now it was scattered voices. Short. Uncertain. The kind that fill a space when something is no longer right but no one knows why. I exhaled slowly and stepped away from the panel. Everything was in motion now. Not just the water. The situation. The realization. The consequences that would follow. I glanced once more at the logs on the screen. That blank operator line still sat there. Silent. Untouched. Waiting to be questioned. And now, finally, there would be a reason for someone to start asking. I did not touch the lever again. I did not need to. The system was already doing exactly what it was set up to do. I stepped away from the panel and walked back toward the railing. The air felt heavier now. Damp. Charged. The kind of air that settles right before something shifts for good. I looked down at the valley. The change was no longer subtle. The waterline had pushed forward enough that it no longer looked like a coincidence. It looked intentional. People were moving now. Chairs scraping against wood. Shoes stepping back from the edge. Conversations breaking into sharper tones. That quiet uncertainty had turned into something clearer. Concern. One of the deck posts sat deeper in the water than before. Not by much. But enough that you could not ignore it anymore. A man pointed toward it, speaking quickly to someone beside him. Another person crouched again, touching the water, then pulling their hand back like it felt different. That reaction spread. Small. Fast. Like a ripple moving through a crowd instead of the river. I leaned slightly against the railing and watched it unfold. Calm. Measured. This was the moment where everything changed without anything dramatic happening. No alarms. No sirens. Just realization setting in piece by piece. I glanced back at the panel behind me. The numbers continued to climb. Still controlled. Still within limits. But no longer something you could dismiss. The system had crossed the line where it became visible. That was all it needed to do. Down below, more people started stepping away from the water. Not running. Not panicking. Just shifting. Creating distance. The kind of movement that comes from instinct before logic catches up. Someone gestured toward the far end of the deck where the ground met the riverbank. The edge had softened. The line between land and water blurred just enough to make it feel unstable. I could see it from here. The soil darkening. Saturated. Losing firmness. That was the part they never planned for. They built for appearance. Clean edges. Straight lines. Perfect access to the water. They never accounted for what happens when water decides to move those lines. I exhaled slowly and stepped back from the railing. My boots echoed softly against the concrete again. The hum beneath me remained steady. Stronger now. Like the system had settled into its new state. I walked back to the panel and looked at the log one more time. That blank operator entry sat there, unchanged. Quiet. Invisible to anyone who did not know what they were looking at. But now, it mattered. Now there was a reason for someone to dig deeper. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone again. Took one more set of photos. Clear. Focused. Every detail captured. Then I slipped it away. I looked out one last time toward the valley. The scene had shifted completely. No more relaxed posture. No more casual movement. People stood in small groups now, watching the water instead of enjoying it. Trying to understand something that had already moved beyond simple explanation. I rested my hand lightly on the panel again. The vibration felt stable. Controlled. Exactly where it needed to be. I did not need to push it further. Not today. Because what mattered was already in motion. The system. The pressure. The questions that would follow. And the one detail no one down there had noticed yet. The fact that every inch of water they were watching was still being controlled from right here.